So continuing on a love that is actually loving, and if we take attachment pattern, which is a very American teaching, right? And we take the Venusian of a love that is actually loving as a value. So from the Venusian place, you want to contemplate on how do you relate to that and how does that meet the needs of attachment or safe attachment pattern. For example, psychologically safe, spiritually safe, economically safe. And safety does not happen with perpetual war. Okay, if people are being trafficked and that money launders on oils and gas, that's your 401k. That's the laser in the city that you're both invested in, and that could unfortunately literally be your tenant's house, which is your property and your assets, or your very housing. Even if you're homeless, right? They laser cars. I'm getting a Trump. They laser the pets. They laser the pets. They laser the pets that people have. We should have the laser the pets. But now, what if you're Jupiterian? Okay, what if the power of choice? So how do you adapt the love that you truly love to the power of choice? And so here you can think about, first of all, you take the concept of safe attachment and love that is actually loving. Think about what it is for you, and then you can break it down to the choices that you can make in your life today that align with that. What are the series of choices that that don't align with that, and begin to work on discernment. If you talk about the power of choice, another thing Jupiterian is awareness, and awareness on when is that a choice, when is that a command, when is that something is coming from you, when is that something is coming from another, and that can relate you to a sense of embodiment, okay, where you want to think about Jupiter in Taurus or Venus in Pisces, and see which works for you, okay, which energy works for you, because Venus in Pisces or even in Sagittarius is going to be Jupiterian Venus, and then you can relate and connect to the Venus, so it can be your hips or your feet, and begin to sense, okay, for the energy, where Jupiter Taurus would be expansion on the sensory and somatic experience that you have around the voice, the throat, the singing, the neck, and even the womb, okay, to some extent. And those can be sensors, which is the nervous system that can assist you and facilitate with the power of choice. And then pay attention. Is it your sensory experience? Is it something to try to infiltrate your nervous system and your sensory experience? And so that awareness, increased awareness, then increases the power of choice if you're Jupiter oriented. Okay? Whereas if you're Venus oriented, taking action would be assertion. So you can think about, people talk about setting a boundary, but it's even more than that, because we're talking about boundaries that we're not even supposed to set from a Venusian point of view. Love is supposed to be actually loving. Okay? And so that high sense of entitlement that Israel and Israeli often feel or are being perceived as is also an iron level of dominance for the value of love itself. Okay, love is actually loving. That's a fixed value. It doesn't change. It doesn't transform. But the only thing it transforms is everything around it. Anything is not love that's actually loving has to transform or cross over, okay, in spirit and in matter. So when it comes to dealing with MK Ultra, you have to remind yourself love is actually loving. Am I receiving love that is actually loving here? You can find it for yourself. Consistency is an issue. Okay, it's not, sometimes it's torturous, sometimes it's fantastic. No. Love that is actually loving. We talk about safe attachment. We talk about your ability to express your emotions and to be supported, but we're also talking about tenderness. And now that can be the funniest thing, because you don't think of Israel as tender, but that's because we deal with a lot of trauma of love that is not actually loving. You get the Taurus with a love that is actually loving, you get the most tender, loving, caring, fluffy, ooey gooey human being. Okay? When a Taurus relaxes into themselves, this is why there's so many eyes on the Venusian Taurus that it might not even take care of themselves like, other Venuses would. But there's so many eyes on Taurus because a relaxed Taurus is a sight, right? And so, and it's also because of their sense of relaxation or serenity. But when you talk about receptivity, you gotta stand up to those standards, in the sense that you gotta be someone that the Taurian can relax into. Okay, now think MK Ultra versus that. Okay, how is it on the pole of Venusian, relaxed, senti, in like pleasure senti, loving, respectful, honoring of space, of time, boundaries, or scorpionic, to the death, crossover, kamikaze on that dumb fuckery, get your rape culture off our lawn, So you think about that, and you think about, if you're an American dealing with that, or a Dutch dealing with that, the Netherlands have moon they have moon in Taurus, so on Beta per se, so that would be good to activate that, okay? And you want to think about how do you get connected with that Taurus Scorpio part of your own chart, as that is antidote to sleep deprivation, anxiety. I think a moon Taurus talisman could be appropriate. You want to try that, or a Venus in Jupiter sign, so Venus Pisces, or even Venus Sag, can be something you might want to try. Venus is exalted in Pisces, and she's strong in fire signs as well. So that may be something you want to try and to work with as an energy, and begin to connect that, and begin to connect to the value of pleasure. Willing consent is one giant thing that exposes human trafficking and sex espionage. It exposes it from the core. Okay, if you've been listening to my story, you when you get that's sitting on willing consent, and the moves that I made. I'm not saying the choices that I made, but the moves, the actions that I took, not the choices that I made, the actions that I took. Okay, this is a difference. If you're Jupiterian, it's like, oh, you made that and that choice with that and that situation. Yes, and I took a certain sort of action that asserts that value to the death. Okay, so that exposed the dumb fuckery, and that exposed, so is a keyword, exposing to so many things, where the value is still like, I'm a peaceful seeking person. Like, give me a good, you give me a place I can relax into and some lychee and I'm good. Like, basically very, even boring. Okay, really, Taurus placement is the fixed earth sign. It's not the high thrill of a lunar Cancer, okay? It's not thrill-seeking. And because it is not thrill-seeking, it's not eager to fight, and it's very eager to end the fight. You want to think about Adolf Hitler and the terminal solution. It's a different deacon of the sun, but it's the same archetype of, I just want to go back to my bed, watch Netflix and chill, go to the beach, swim a little, relax a little, drink a little, something nice, usually sweet, replace that with healthy stuff so that I can enjoy more sensual things, okay, and maintain my blood flow and good health, have quality food, quality clothes, okay, quality soil, and that's the most of the worries, okay? You would get a Taurian to work like a maniac in the yard to create a forest in all various places, but you don't get them into a fight that quickly. Again, of course, every Taurian has, Mars has, like, there's other placements. We're talking about that very archetype. Having a luminary there is important. But if a Taurus gets to the fight, you get to the Scorpio side, and Scorpio wants a terminal solution. The only bridging here is like, if we travel, okay, 7th of October, entire Israel was in Copenhagen, or we had a colony in Thailand, or a colony in India, and the Europeans, came to war. But there was population exchange. You would tell an Israeli, go back to where you came from. They're like, well, I tried. Okay. Or you tell an Israeli, go elsewhere. It's like, well, that's the default. We try to see where is nice to live, where is better experience. Like, even if I think my situation was homeless and there was like, there was no solution in Israel, let's try my other homeland, okay, where there was a winter shelters, far better experience. And still what needs to change, like the Israeli will fight for that, which seems like a tremendous sense of entitlement. But the fact is they're actually right, okay? You're actually not supposed to be raped for a living if you don't have a place to stay because you went away from a situation where you didn't want to be raped for a living. And we will bomb gas, oil, everything above and below and whatnot until we get comfy. Okay? It's a terminal solution. That's very much, and this is why Israelis are like, the people are like associate Israel with Nazis, because that's a terminal solution. They definitely seek a terminal solution to a problem. Okay? I'm not talking about the infiltrated stuff or the weird shit that you see. I'm talking about a very basic archetype. And so you want to think about those MK Ultra dumbfuckers. Like, you don't want to deal with that forever, right? You don't want to be living like that. You don't want to be having entire industry and economy around both being invisible and questioning your choices all the time, and being bombarded with GMOs and everything. Like, you at the end of the day, you do want to pick your battles, not having your battles picked for you in the form of everyday struggle to just exist as an emotional being on planet Earth. Okay, so you think about that fixed sign, and how the Taurian can bring actually confidence, or can provide for the Cancerian, given that the love is actually loving. So you want to bring that in your chart. you want to see, because you have something in Scorpio, or you have a Mars that rules your Scorpio side. So you have this axis wherever you live, and that beginning to see how, how listening to me talking about that changes your perspective versus being born into that. Okay, as there are a lot of problems that Israelis are just being born into, and probably have a ton of solutions. If you think about safe attachment as an American teaching, and that's something that I can tell as an Israeli is like, nobody knows what's that. Okay, or having containment and listening, emotional intelligence. I think about the half moons that I build in the Negev as building containment in the soil. There's literally something that Israel and the land of Palestine has not had for millennia, at least not in the desert. So conceptually, safe attachment, we talk about love, is a love that is actually loving. And you can't have that with MK Ultra. This is something that an Israeli would get perhaps quicker than somebody who has to climb an entire Capricorn mountain to get to the top of it. And Israeli would get it from the core, because we think about why. Why am I not having safe attachment? Well, this incest inbred Mormon cults in the United States that are linked to Opde and the Vatican and the Masons, of course, and the Satanic Church, that deprive you of your dignity, deprive you of the power of choice, gaslighting you with you cannot be abused without consenting. No. But one of the antidotes to that is I do not consent. Very Taurian, right? I do not consent. I never consented. Informed consent. Okay, there are legalities to consent that are also Venusian. And so that can be something that is on par with American values of, your dignity, your liberty, your freedom, that cannot be confiscated from you by debt or taxation, for the matter. Is it different if the taxing comes to a situation where, let's say, you're an entrepreneur and you need housing, then there are places that you can work subsidized or for free, or there are places that you can live while you're working on your business, while you're working on your jump start. Okay, you don't have to be worried about being human trafficked if your venue didn't fathom, or the first one. It takes about 7, 8, 9, 10 businesses until the right one comes about. Even I think about Elon Musk discussing PayPal and saying that was like maybe the 7th startup. If you think about Israel as a startup nation, you need to back it up. And if your taxes go to backing it up without Rothschild, okay, that would be the model that Israel also would have a lot to learn from, okay? So here we're talking about funding, we're talking about safe attachment, we're talking about a love that's actually loving, we're talking about the value of dignity, which is a very American value, but it's also in par with a love that is actually loving. Okay, love is honoring of our dignity. And dignity is something that nobody can take from you. You cannot lose your dignity. You cannot be deprived of your dignity. You cannot give your consent to be deprived of your dignity. Okay? And when it has to be consistent around that, we talk about the moon as memories. And you talk about the Taurian soil, stepping barefoot on the soil, working with the hands, or working in your garden, building structures in your garden, even half moons, okay, that create economicity for the water, to bring in the water, and at the same time that brings in the nervous system, the emotional stability, back to the root chakra, better relations also with indigenous society in the United States. Do you think about the people in Israel? They have very good relations with the Palestinians, okay? It's the above structure that infiltrates it and tries to make a cult-like country. Okay, and I'm talking about, you're gonna have the equivalent of a redneck American and the equivalent of an indigenous tribe working together. They might not be in the same political opinion, but they'll be good friends. They will argue for hours, but they will do something together, and they will be, very good friends who argue for hours. And that's something it's usually the right wing people that the lefty people are like, we want a divorce. Okay. Let's separate peacefully. The right wing people get to the nitty gritty of it, and they can argue for hours. Sometimes they get married. So when it's not exploitation based, and if it is, they're going to be a pack of bullies from each side. Okay, so I can think about, maybe that could be an antidote to the lover boy if they weren't so racist. But you want to think about how grounding yourself in the soil, and I think, buying dirt is not something that's stranger to Americans, right? It's coming from the United States. And the good old American value of having your land and your property and growing your food, and having, the dog running outside, and having vast space, and turning up the soil. Like, if they try to pollute that, okay, we have masses of people that require to change that, okay, to change, to turn the soil around and depollute the area. Okay, either they're gonna have to throw an A-bomb, which would mean you're gonna get a 70 years off that region. We have a preservation forest, and they're still gonna have to give you the same conditions, otherwise you can invoke the second. Great things in America, you have to take them into advantage. Don't let the rules fool you. You have the right to invoke the second with whichever weapon. Nobody has the right to litigate you under maritime law. Okay, and if they do that, they're basically calling on a rebellion against the U.S. Constitution. So they're basically traitors. Even if that's your government, John Locke, that the Second Amendment is there for a reason. So that's something amazing that the United States gave the world. Okay. And it's not for nothing that I see suddenly land given back to indigenous tribes, because they're like, United States knows what it has to do to preserve itself and the legitimacy for it to exist, right? So when it comes to having your soul and stepping on the soil and having your house, Americans have big houses, used to have big houses, and that's fantastic if you think about Taurus and the voice and voicing yourself and singing and expression. And there is awareness to the verbal qualities, okay, so the tenderness or the verbal sensitivity. And so what's important is to pay attention. We take it from a prosionic place. Where are we using words as hypnotic commands? Where are we using words as hypnotic commands on people? Where are we not communicating what we want and need, specifically need, and try to psychically or psychologically get the other person to meet our needs where they might not be in a place where they can willingly consent to do that, and they need to be in that place to feel that they're not violated by us. Whereas you could get the same thing, but you need to kind of express your need. So that would be, I have my own moon in Cancer. These are absolutely points for me as well. And that way you don't destable, okay, for that love that is actually loving. And so in those places where we become aware of that and transform that in ourselves, Cancer is actually trying in Scorpio, that we can find that inner peace, and that by the spirit of Procyon sweetening, so much so that the MK Ultra mind control, we're less susceptible to that because we do it less. This is from a Procyonic Jupiterian point of view, not from a Venusian. You're not to blame that something has happened to you. Just to make that very clear. And you did not consent, okay? And so that is, in a Procyonic way, can nullify the legitimacy of MK Ultra. If you think of Nelson Mandela, Procyon is the Nelson Mandela planet, where fixed star, where if you think about colonialism, then what is that? It's another form of racial segregation. What other forms we have? Bloodline segregation. Only this bloodline can be royal. The centralization of the regime with one bloodline, no inbred incest cults. So he began to abolish that in his culture, and what was stopping him from beating colonialism, because he was taking the good things that he was learning, what was stopping him from beating colonialism was his own people. That allowed for him to be in jail for 28 years because he was a controversial character. And that was not because of white colonialist America, and he knew that very well, but because his own people were still colonizers internally. And so when it comes to MK Ultra, we want to honestly and squarely ask ourselves, where are we doing something that is a bit reminding of that, and how can we transform and change that and still hold the value that we're not to blame for what happens to us, and there is a point of interference, okay, where if we don't act that to one another, to we the people, and we don't allow that, not even for climbing up the ladder, okay, or having material security, then or getting sex, okay, like it's 8th house. So that requires for big authenticity and tremendous transformation, because it's 8th house, okay, it's an 8th house Cancer for the country. Each person meets that in their own chart, but that can facilitate either from actions, okay, if you have more Venusian, actions that are in alignment with that, love that is actually loving, or you say there's willing consent, or freedom and dignity, and so on, assert that freedom and dignity. If you're more from the Jupiterian, then that aligns with a series of choices, increased awareness, and a series of choices that align with love that is actually loving. So you would not be accepting that, not from your colleagues, not from your boss, not from your friend, not from your spouse, not from your family. Okay, you can be caring for your family, but you're going to take up space and you're going to set the boundary to the connection. It doesn't mean cut it, but definitely set a boundary. And I think when it comes to dealing with, let's say, narcissistic abuse, Americans are top when it comes to the teachings, to the red flags, to being informed, to understanding that the gaslighting, okay, all these Pluto Capricorn themes, or how and how that expresses itself from the government. And so that is a process of completion where you're not going to be accepting of those things anymore, and you're going to be activating your Taurus Scorpio when it comes to asserting that to your space, to your house, to your heart, to your domain, enters love that is actually loving, and nothing but love that is actually loving. So I think what Israelis can take from Americans is definitely the attachment pattern, pragmatism. Okay, my belief has consequences. What are those consequences the way I see them? And if those consequences, I don't like them, I can change my beliefs. Okay, but it's not going to be an inquisition form. It's going to be a place where I have the liberty to see what values are consistent with a love that is actually loving, and what beliefs are consistent with a love that is actually loving. Okay, for example, I'm a divine being, deserving of love. Okay, that exists, that is in alignment. People might disagree, and that's their belief, but they cannot force or assert that belief on me, because that would lead to rape, right? It is also going the other way around, where somebody violates my boundaries, they're telling me I'm not a divine being, okay, deserving of love, which can in turn cause me to say you are not deserving of love, when this is, okay, how you behave towards me. Okay, you deserve enough love from God, you deserve enough love from Jesus, but you're definitely not deserving of love from me to be investing in a connection with you, when that is murdering my soul. And if you're not valuing me as a person that is divine, has a right to dignity, and honoring my will and consent, economically, spiritually, physically, any way, shape, form, politically, whatnot, you're telling me that you are not deserving of my love, and I step back from you. If I cannot step back from you, you're dead. Okay? So that's something Israelis can take from Americans, this sense of pragmatism. What beliefs do I have? Do my beliefs are my beliefs compatible with a love that is actually loving? My beliefs about myself, my beliefs about myself, particularly about the world. It's like, okay, you can change that and see how that works. But there are all types of facets to the world. It doesn't change who we are. And another thing is, we talked about the safe attachment. So What is safe attachment? It's also being able to express our emotions, being able to say yes, no, and maybe as we see fit. And we also, need to communicate our needs, but that does not pertain to willing consent in the sense that we don't need to, if a person is frozen, not cooperating, they're having a trauma response. They don't need to you cannot require for some standard that is inhumane, but what needs to be is awareness and respect. There's no gaslighting around that. This is why the case in France won, right? The person could not say no. That's fucking deep. If you think about nature, like I'm half Dutch, and for us, the red light district is something that is so culturally ingrained. And that thing is so dark because it's espionage and it's people like tortured, electrocuted. It's like, where is that? And where is what I just said as an Israeli, okay? Those meetings are very important because the sun and moon of Netherlands are conjunct on Beta Persei. And that is a union that can bring and transform and bring wealth to Dutch people, to Israeli people. Because in Netherlands, the importance, the emphasis is about the right to be who you are, which is something that Israel can learn a lot from. And in Israel, the emphasis, the awareness of willing consent, and the right to be who you are with the willing consent is something that is conditioned to be able to be who you are, because otherwise you don't exist. And Dutchies are like, they are like, I have a right to be who I am. Yes, okay, but you're going for this MK Ultra, with this programming, with these things. How do we get you back to the soil, to the body, to reconnect to embodiment? Then you know who you are. Then you can be who you are, right? And on another thing we can take from Americans is a communication that supports willing consent. So there's conjoining of values. And that's not from the place of putting the blame on the victim, because that does not support, like, it's not going to get wet. She's not going to taste good. She's going to be fungy. Okay? Going back to an incredibly triggering moment, when I was reading about the Deming accusations, and then they're mixed with the identity of Deming, which is like, come on. But never mind. Okay, speak about it in another instance. But the thing is that there was one of the children that he was molesting, and I believe Hansa Medma. Okay, it's my right to believe Hansa Medma. And we talk about expression as healing from sexual boundary violation. So one of the children had something like their semen was like weird, and that was like, I guess, an STD. And a person says like, I don't care. And you understand that those things have to do with sexual boundary violation, with rapes, okay? And you think about the nourishment as important to willing consent. You think about the moon and the Venus, and how nourishment, the correct nourishment, is important to preserve, okay, the pH levels, or a bodily fluid, which is basically Jupiter and the moon. Squirting is, by the way, also associated with Libra. Every time something is in Libra, there is that piss or squirt, okay? So you see, when we talk about the conversation around willing consent, the conversation genuinely gets juicy, whereas where that's not honored, there's water depletion. It's also in the soil. That's also how we get famine, how a lush forest becomes a desert, and how we get 2 generations of men killed in a war. Okay? It's like, and so that is, and with Taurus, you think about the physical or the touch. The touch has to be loving. Everything has to be loving. It's a sense of embodiment that brings a person back to the earth, back to the soil. So you take the idyllic emotional containment of the Cancerian, okay, the Cancerian archetype, with the patience. Okay, if you think about, Christlich teaching, is love is patient, love is kind. And so the ability to take a no, the waiting, okay, the patience, the ability to be invited rather than to break into. Okay, because breaking into to Venusian land, it's rape. It's like you're already in rape territory. Okay? There's something that a lot of cultures are not used to. And again, I'm not talking about the Israeli cult. Okay, the cult is a cult. It's everywhere. It's a cult in Africa. It's a cult in Netherlands. It's a cult in USA. It's a cult in China. It's just the same cult. Okay, the lodges be the lodges, but that's what they do. They deplete yin. Okay, but the Taurian archetype, the not inverted version, and then to cause an inversion, you are in rape blood. You're boom, Scorpio. And you know how Scorpios, when it wants to transform something. So it's going to be looking at the core issues, like, did you use your upbringing from a cult and that's why you're doing that? Is like really tending to the core issue. That's going to shake you from the core. This is why it's so challenging to go through the processes of the Taurus Scorpio. Because the there we are at it again ends up, from the Taurian perspective, okay, there's another layer and another layer and another layer and another layer. It deepens the transformation until you're completely transformed. If you hold on to being annoying in the sense of not respecting boundaries, touching unlovingly, stuff like that, you're going to run into better Mercedes, bodies upon bodies. And really, over nothing. Okay, like you could have respected yin, respected women, not try to control, gaslight, take your anger out, do microaggressions, all these American words, and you'd be good. You'd be fantastic. You'd have a love that stands the test of time. Or alternatively, respect for your yes, no, and maybe. If you're not interested in contact, that's absolutely okay. Okay, but what you can't do is that MK Ultra type relational pattern. Okay. That's the beauty of it. That's the amazing thing of it. Like, MK Ultra comes to Israel, and then people are like, okay, what's that? Why is it everywhere? Why is everything ultra? Why is Hapoel ultra? Okay, I saw ultra Hapoel today. Why is everything ultra? What is ultra south? Okay, why are people acting like robots? When I first ran into that in Israel, when I ran into that at the academia, I was calling it robotrix. And it was really funny. I didn't know what it is. It's actually not funny at all, because these children are tortured before they become adults. Okay, it's not at all funny. But I didn't know what it is, and then you run into weird behaviors, and and then you read about sociopaths, and it starts from narcissism, sociopath. You don't have the information. There's nobody to tell you that information. Okay, because that's the thing. They keep distinct, separate words. Where if you go to the United States, or you see people, I see colleagues from the United States talking about things, and I'm like, oh, that talisman is actually for that. Oh, they were actually talking about MK Ultra without talking about MK Ultra. Oh, there's it's kind of another type of North Korea, but you don't see it. I remembered from Model UN that US is #1 in surveillance, so you couldn't pull the surveillance card if you were doing USA and it was Russia in front of you or China in front of you or any country. You could not pull the surveillance. That would backfire if you're doing USA. So it's kind of everybody knew that. Okay. But it's everybody knows that. Nobody can talk about that. Why aren't American astrologers talking about Epstein? Hardly anybody. Why aren't they talking about the violation of the First Amendment with the housing issue? What's going on here? And why so many of them did not even talk about COVID, even though they were targeted individuals. And I'm okay, then I as an Israeli must talk about that. Because that's the Israeli thing. If there's a problem, I need to do something about that. Okay? There's and that's we can talk about each other's problems. A lot of things, but thanks to Elon Musk and X, there's a lot of things that about so many criticism about Israel that I was oh my God, I did not even know that we cannot have DNA tests without the approval of the government. What's in our DNA? What's in there? I think it looks like I have red blood. I mean, I don't. What's that? So you can write it in the comments below. What do you think is in my DNA? And that is, and some things you want to talk about, and before Pluto came to Aquarius, there was this Palestinian person that was talking about the Ethiopian scandal. I didn't know, for example, in 2013 they were castrating Ethiopian women so that they wouldn't bring children because that was undesired bloodline. And I'm huh? I didn't know that it still happens in 2013. They wanted to give me that by the bloggers. It's basically chemical castration. And I'm they did not want me to multiply. I wonder why. I mean, Julian Assange, it's okay. It has 2 children. That just happened. Van Nunu, I don't know. And then it went from that to wanting me to have children. Fuck. I was targeted by bloodline and trying consistently to get me to have a partner. I'm not joking. At first it was around fertility. I was oh, I'm curating my fertility and this and that. But what they do, they would get a mother to have a baby, then they would, this is the own part, they would criticize of her ability to have a children, and then they would take the child, and I don't know what would do with that, because it was obviously not good for the child. And that is this is all that yin depletion. It's not just Israel, it's everywhere around. Oh my God, I have to show, I cannot show that. There was a photo of a cloud that's looking like a penis with some line coming out of it, okay, in the sky. And I was yeah, those rape incest cults it hurts sperm count, and what you see in the picture is longing for times where we're not ruled by a rape cult that depletes sperm count and makes the sperm bad quality and bad taste. Oh, and depletes erection as well. So, you wake up in the sky and that's the cloud shape. Okay? That is unfortunately very Israeli. Okay? But you know how Scorpio deals with that. And that's a cult-like country, okay? It's not, and it's not just Israel. The cult is global. It's the Masons, it's the Rosicrucians, the Opti, it's the Vatican, with pyramidal structure synagogues that worship Baal, which has nothing to do with Judaism or Christianity or Islam, okay? So it's the inversion on something. And then when you want to kind of like bring it all together, you can see how the fact that Israel is now dealing with American problems on Israeli soil is creating innovation, which is what we do, and sharing teachings and practical tools to deal with that. And Americans have abundance of tools to deal with that. Whereas the value of love that is actually loving and taking it back from the Capricorn polarity of like climbing up the ladder using these techniques and utilizing them, which also Israelis do, which I think is undermining, but everybody has their own way about this. But also standing 10 toes down, not being afraid to be vulgar. Because just as the Taurian part can be so tender and sweet, the Scorpionic part is, you think about a woman who's not afraid to be a man. Okay, there's not afraid, and Americans have that. Okay, you have women that invoke the second. Okay, but it's also when it comes to the notion of willing consent and the I do not consent, nobody can gaslight you about your consent with things like nobody can abuse you without your consent. Now, that's true when you raise awareness to where was that consent violated, and then you can re-emerge and put conscious choice where it didn't exist before. Yes, but when it comes to like the abuse, there's the principle of the soft skull in heuristics just for that. You want to know the basics. You want to know these things because that matters, and that's what that MK Ultra works when it comes to the people at first. Then it gets global, and it wants to zombify humanity. And everybody's going to be Israel and Palestine. Okay, if you get multiple local, then people are in consistent war. Okay, and another thing that adds to that is, 8th house Cancer is you think about the gold rush with the sun, you think about sea levels, you think about food, but we're actually talking about Taurus Scorpio, which is riches with gas and oil. And it's not just about, United States is an expedition to, bring peace, world peace, and then you see them like, looking for oil and gas. But it's actually about that oil and gas is something that you're invested in your 401k, in your life insurance, together with housing, and that's how you create supposedly leverage in a system, in an investment technique called laser, mind you. Okay, Maui laser, Nova laser. But that is one facet, because it sounds very reasonable. You market oil, you sell oil, then you can have oil for the entire country, or you sell it abroad or whatnot. But that's actually not the case, because this is the proper business. That's why America is in debt. Okay, it is not really in debt. It has resources, and it can print money anytime. So that's not, you don't really have debt. You have unwillingness to print more money and provide housing for the people. Housing first, it was invented in the United States. You don't actually, when we print money, we don't actually have debt. Okay, that is a fiction. If you can print more money, you don't actually have debt. It doesn't correspond to the gold standard since the Second World War. After 2008, there was a little bit of change in the banks, but the United States can still print money. Okay, you have to understand that, because those of you who are buying into the gaslighting are going to talk about choices and implications and this and that. Like, the bubble is already bubbly. So that has choice, that has implications, okay, money printing, but you don't really have a national debt if you can print money. Now, how that money launders, what's going into the supposed legal business of oils and gas, and that is human trafficking, which United States also tops. Okay, and I'm half Dutch, half Israeli. So it's a tight competition when we talk about percentage of population to human trade. But it tops conflict zones, and it tops freaking Amsterdam. So you gotta know your Model UN, okay? So there's going to be another episode of that.